CEO, National Master Evan Rabin, and I am very excited to be here with a very special guest, the National Master James Altucher, who himself is one of the biggest podcasters around. He's an American hedge fund manager, the author of 20 books. He's also sold well, he's co-founded 20 companies, which is just absolutely amazing. He's a Cornell grad, and he is also a U.S. chess master. So, James, it's my pleasure and honor to have you on today.
Evan, pleasure to be on here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. So that obviously is your life in very much a nutshell. I mean, you've done obviously so much more. The first question I had for you, just out of curiosity, I mean, you're one of the biggest podcasters yourself. I have seen you, for instance, on Ben Johnson's podcast, Perpetual Podcast, that everyone knows, and many others. But what is it like being on the other side of the fence? Being on someone else's podcast.
I very much enjoy it, actually, because I write quite a bit, and I really started off as a writer, and when you're writing, I'm usually not writing about other people or interviewing other people. I'm writing about my own stories and my own opinions and my own theories. But when I do a podcast, I might have someone like, let's say the other day I had on Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, and so he's on not because he wants to hear about me, but because he wants to share his ideas about artificial intelligence, and he just wrote a book on AI, and so that's what we talk about. So I like when I go on other people's podcasts, I get to talk about, it's just more of a free-flowing conversation. I get to talk about things I might be interested in or we're both interested in, and sometimes I do that on my own podcast, but not so much. My format, like many other formats, is an interview format. So, but I experiment with format. Do you ever not have a guest on and just do your own thing?
I only did that on the first episode, actually. Since then, I've had guests on every time. But yeah, you definitely gave me an idea. One of these weeks, I definitely need to do, just a ramble myself.
Yeah, like you're an interview format podcast, right? So
yeah,
maybe do one where you just say, okay, this podcast is going to be my 10 favorite openings, or the 10 openings every beginner should know, something like that, and just see how it goes.
No, I thank you. I mean, you're the idea person. In fact, one of the things that I listened to, I actually listened to your first recording with Ben Johnson in 2017 yesterday, and he had that interesting feature where people were going to vote in questions, and he asked you to name the feature. So you were starting to think of all these like fun test puns. So I did know that there was definitely going to be like a little bit of creative ideas on the show for sure. So
yeah, and you see now that with the popularity of like chess streaming and chess podcasts like Ben's, and there's so many different formats you could play with. You could have like, okay, here's Magnus Carlsen. I'm going to do a whole episode about Magnus Carlsen's craziest openings. So like, Magnus plays at least in Bullet or Blitz. He sometimes plays Knight H3. He sometimes plays A4. Like, you could do a whole episode about that. It would be fascinating.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely have to, and I do find it pretty interesting, and the whole Twitch phenomenon has been crazy. Of course, we have our own Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Premier Chess, for those that don't know. I'm speaking of Magnus. I'm actually excited to be going to Dubai in 2 weeks for the first half of the World Championship with Magnus against Nepo. What are your thoughts about the upcoming World Championship?
It's interesting. I'm so obviously Magnus is an amazing player, but I don't know if like most people realize how amazing he is. Because he can, it seems to me like his strategy in general is to get into positions that are roughly equal or confusingly equal. Like maybe they're equal, maybe he's even a little bit down, and he just knows how to play those structures very well, and able to overcome the opponent. Now, at the highest levels, that doesn't always work. He has to be all theoretical and booked up, but he's so creative in the opening because he doesn't really care about being engine ahead out of the opening. He just cares about being in a position that he is comfortable with, and that's usually somewhat what I would consider a civil position. I'm sure it's not, but a position maybe with, again, like kind of equalish, and not like tactical equal, like just kind of equal.
Yeah,
And
well,
he
one
just
thing I tell people all the time, James, actually, is Magnus Carlsen style, right? Very often I'll work with adult, beginner, intermediate students, and they'll go all out attacking. I'm like, what justifies an attack here, right? And then I explain to them, look at all of Magnus Carlsen's games where he gets these seemingly dead equal positions against 2750 players in the end game, and will just like somehow milk something from literally nothing.
Yeah,
Um,
it's fascinating, and like I often tell people who are investors, the investing in chess and entrepreneurship in chess has some parallels, but investing, it's all about removing risk. We all know that there's rewards in the stock market. You read articles every day. So and so invested in Bitcoin and then made $10 million in a week or whatever. And but that's rare. But we know the rewards are there. So the way to get those rewards is to not lose. So you have to like manage your risk. And so I always tell people the best way to win the game is to stay in the game. And now when I say that, I'm referring to investing or entrepreneurship. But you see with Magnus, it's the same thing holds. He makes good moves, obviously. He makes sure there's not tactical mistakes, and he's extremely great tactically. And he knows that if he stays in the game, there's a good chance his opponent could overreach, whether they're 2750 or 2400.
well, those are two lines that I just couldn't help but write down. I'm definitely going to be using all the time. Investing is all about removing risk, and the best way to win the game is to is to stay in the game.
Yeah, because
Um,
knowing that there's rewards in entrepreneurship investing, that's like, okay, that's obvious. So how do you get those rewards? It's not by like pursuing them. It's just about having a fairly good idea. Like Magnus gets into a fairly good position or a decent position, and then it's about just all the time reducing that risk. Now, of course, he's also amazingly creative. Like I don't know if you saw this game. I forgot if it was in. I forgot which tournament it was in, but it's fairly recent. He played against Anish Giri, and in like the eighth move, he sacrifices a queen. Not really sacrifice. He gives up a queen for 3 pieces. And it's a very unusual, creative kind of position. And Magnus is extraordinarily good at playing these creative positions as well. I'm not saying he's a boring player, but I'm just fascinated by his ability to stay in the game and always look for small, tiny opportunities. And he has no commitment in the sense that he's not like committed to attacking on the king side or the queen side. He's every move. It's like he reformulates his plan.
So yeah, and I find it very interesting. One thing Grandmaster Alex Lenderman, who's been on the podcast, once talked to me about was it's important to be able to be adaptable, right, and not just play your style, right. So he actually once told me, "Oh, go home and look over all of Mikhail's games." And I listened. I went home. I looked at like a lot of his games, and I was actually shocked. Most of them were these long positional, like long games. And of course, like you and everyone else, I was thinking, okay, Mikhail is this magical, from Riga player, with all these wild tactical complications. And I was actually relatively surprised to see that, both of his games were actually like quiet, right? So at the end of the day, yes, you do have your style, but you do need to, kind of go back and evaluate the position and, come up with plans accordingly. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say a fault of mine as a player, which I'm trying to get over, is let's say, I'm playing a knight c3 Sicilian, okay, a Grand Prix attack. It's very easy to get obsessed with doing your plan and only your plan. Queen e1 h4, f5, bishop h6, knight
autopilot.
c5, sack on f6, and then checkmate. So like, and if you don't get that plan done, you lose. Or if you're playing the King's Indian, if you don't get like f5, f4, g5, g4, h5, you feel like you're going to lose. But it's very instructive to see these games where you don't have to play that way. You could use a variety of plans, and at every given point, maybe even every move, you kind of say to yourself, "There's got to be at least more than one plan here," and then you consider among the plans.
Mm. Yeah, coming up with candidate moves and going from there is important. So James, I wanted to actually completely change the conversation and backtrack. One very common theme that we've had on the podcast in many episodes is leaving corporate America to go into entrepreneurship. So I myself worked at Oracle for 3 years and Rapid7 for a year before co-founding Pillar Sales, a company that did sales for startups. Did that for a year, and then started Premier Chess. But I know you graduated Cornell, briefly worked at HBO, and then left to start your own thing. What made you leave HBO relatively quickly and start your entrepreneurship career?
Yeah, I was at HBO. HBO was kind of the only real job I've had. I was at HBO from 1994 to 1997, and I had already started my own business. So I was kind of during the day at HBO and then all night at my startup, which was called Reset, and we made websites for companies. Now you would think, oh, well, why, that's such an obvious, why did they need a company? They could just use WordPress. But at the time, no company had websites. This was in the mid '90s to late '90s. So we did the very first AmericanExpress.com, TimeWarner.com, ConEdison.com. We did a lot of record labels. Did a lot of movie studios. We did the websites for all the Matrix movies, for instance. And it's, basically, I left HBO. I did HBO.com. And I had a small salary at HBO. My title was junior analyst programmer, and my salary was about $40,000 a year in New York City, which and I had gone to graduate school. I was 27 years old. I couldn't make ends meet really, and at my business, I was making more money at my side business than all my bosses added up. And at some point, it just made sense to just devote full time to it and think about really making it into a solid business. Because just I was the CEO of the business. There was like 20 employees, and I was just a part-time CEO. And a business, like any relationship, a business needs watering and love and a healthy dose of motivation and optimism during the day. And within a year of leaving HBO, we were able to build up the business enough that we sold it. Unfortunately, I learned a lot about business, but I learned nothing about money. And I made a lot of money selling that business, and then I immediately went broke afterwards. Took about 2 or 3 years, but I went dead broke, like to zero.
Yeah, and that leads me to the next question. You sold Reset Inc. for 15 million. I was actually just an hour ago listening to one of your TED talks. That you did where in your words you became almost like a drunken Hollywood star. That lost everything. And look, I mean that in some ways it's crazy, especially looking back, many years, later. But you made 15 million and made some investments and. I don't know if this is an exaggeration or not, but you said you had like $46 in your bank account, in the TED talk. So, but nevertheless, I mean, you definitely, in chess words, made like some big blunders, there, right? What did you do to like, totally, come back from a big blunder, and move forward?
Well, I was really depressed. I mean, I had bought this house, and I had 2 kids that I had to feed. Like they were 2 babies, and I made all this money, and I lost all of it through not managing my risk. I was going too much after the rewards, and I sacked my queen thinking there was an attack, and there was no attack. And there was one period I was losing about $1 million a week, in the summer of 2000, I
Wow.
think. And it was very painful. And I lost my house, and everybody was upset at me. And I had no friends because everybody's your friend on the way up, but they're not your friend on the way down. And uh, what really is important is you can't talk your way out of depression. You have to do things. And so, every day I made sure I tried to do something to move forward. Now, it took a long time to get to that point. I was very depressed for a long time. And when you're really depressed, you can't do anything. So you have to start small. Like I started writing down 10 ideas a day. And every day, 10 ideas. Here's 10 things I could do, or here's 10 book ideas, or here's 10 book ideas for someone else, or here's 10 business ideas for somebody else. Just I would practice exercising my idea muscle, and I would practice being creative, because creativity is a muscle. It's just like, again, I'll make the analogy with chess. If you don't study tactics, chances are in a tournament, you're not, when there's high stakes and there's a lot of pressure and you're nervous, you're not going to see all the tactics in a tournament game if you don't spend a lot of time practicing tactics at home. And so I had to practice my creativity, and the act of doing that not only gave me ideas for things I could do with my life and maybe have a career or make a living again, but also it just cheered me up. Like everywhere you look, you start seeing ideas. Like, oh, here's this guy writing these articles, but it's similar to something I was thinking about with investing, and I can combine the two, and here's new ideas. Ironically, I remember my very first idea list. I still do this. I write 10 ideas every single day, and my very first idea list was related to games, which was I came up with a chapter outline for a book I never wrote the book. I was calling this book How to Beat Your Friends and Family at Every Game in the Universe. Because you think about it, like you're home for Thanksgiving, people break out Scrabble or Monopoly or whatever, at least back then. And there's very simple ways to, if you're, unless they're like tournament players in Scrabble or Monopoly or chess or whatever, there's very simple ways to beat your friends and family in anything. Like in Scrabble, if all you do is if you know all the legal 2-letter words, and there's only about 103 of them, like if you know XI, QI, KA, ZA, those are legal words in Scrabble, you're going to beat all your friends in Scrabble if they don't know them. Or Monopoly, if you know that the key is, and I won't go into the math of it, but the key is to own all the orange properties, then give up anything else to own the orange properties, then you're going to beat all your friends at Scrabble, at Monopoly. So that was my first idea list, and then I just kept going, and every single day I make sure I exercise that idea muscle.
Yeah, well, as you said in your episode with Ben too, like the art of learning is really important, right? And it can definitely be applied to anything. And yeah, the art of resiliency is so important. Mitigating risk is an extremely important aspect, both in chess and business. My good friend.
Oh, go ahead.
No, no, I was going to say my good friend and colleague Jim Egerton, who's been on the podcast as well. He wrote a book called Business on the Board, and one of the main things that he actually talks about, is in chess. On one hand, you need to mitigate risk, right? You need to castle, you need to defend all of your pieces, etc. But on the other hand, you need to create initiative. And of course, it's the same in any type of investments or anything else.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong also, like it's also important, and this is related to what we were talking about earlier, it's important to kind of diversify your initiative so that if you see things are happening on the king side, you can get initiative there. But you keep your eye on the queen side just in case, there's possible for initiative there. So you want to have multiple plans. So when I was bouncing back, I was a writer and I was starting to make income from writing. I was writing for the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal. I wrote some books. And then I also was starting a hedge fund. So I was building a hedge fund and making money from that. And I was also always looking into starting new businesses. So a lot of those businesses would fail, but because I had income coming in from other sources, I wasn't, I wasn't going to lose the game if a business went out of business, and so that's the key.
Mm. So, yeah, diversifying of investments, right? It's definitely a great way to mitigate risk and achieve more. So, um, next thing I wanted to get into, we've actually had a fair amount of hedge fund people on the podcast already. My good friend Chris Hunt, who does consulting for hedge funds. Patrick Wolf, of course, the guy you've heard of, Grandmaster who started a hedge fund. Um, my good friend Evan Katz is a supporter of trust in the schools, and does a lot of fundraising for hedge funds. Um, what tips do you have for people that are looking to potentially enter the field? Obviously, it's something that attracts a lot of chess players. There's also Grandmaster Pascal Charbonneau, actually, who's an upcoming guest. Who's pretty big in the hedge fund industry. But what do you have as a recommendation for people that are looking to potentially enter the field?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. Like, when I was first exploring it, it was still kind of the Wild West. There wasn't like a lot of, I mean, there were a fair number of hedge funds, but it was still a small industry. So you could be anybody and start a hedge fund. Now I think it's much more institutionalized, meaning a hedge fund is essentially like a bank. It's like a bank for rich people now. And in order to get in the hedge fund business now, in the normal, what I would call institutionalized hedge fund business, you pretty much have to either work at a bank or a large hedge fund. Then you could maybe go either rise up in that hedge fund, or you spin out of that one and start your own. You also need to, and this is true for whether it's a small fund or a large fund. You need to try to understand why you have an advantage. What is your unfair advantage? Because if you do, there's thousands, maybe even millions of very intelligent people who are investing, and you're competing with them. It's a zero-sum game, so you're competing against those people. So why? Like, somebody told me an investment strategy the other day, and it's a good investment strategy, and it's one that I've known about for 20 years. It's a common strategy in the hedge fund world. And I said to this person, all right, you figured out something that is already in the hedge fund world for 20 years or more. How are you going to beat the hundreds of PhDs who have written software kind of optimizing this strategy for billions and billions of dollars of investing? What's your advantage over them? And my friend who was talking to me, I think that person, individuals do often have advantages because they can get into smaller companies and they're more nimble than a hedge fund with billions of dollars. But she did not say that as an answer. So, I said you shouldn't do this strategy because you're not gonna beat these people who do have an advantage. And so you need to have some reason you have an advantage. Now, another way to look at this, though, is that where is the current Wild West? So maybe it's not in buying and selling stocks. Even if you wrote software to buy and sell stocks, everybody's doing that. So, the Wild West right now might be in, DeFi cryptocurrency. And you could be a younger, less experienced person, but if you have some edge that you feel in DeFi, a lot of institutionalized hedge funds don't understand those tokens yet. So you could potentially have an edge there. Or you could have I know hedge funds that buy collectible baseball cards, and they have some sort of edge. So you always have to think of, like, what's your edge or what's your advantage, particularly if you're not going to go up through the traditional route. The traditional route is, work at Goldman Sachs, work at a hedge fund, spin off from that hedge fund, and have an unfair advantage. But try to find the areas where you could literally skip the line. Like, oh, okay, nobody knows about these specialized, or maybe there's cryptocurrencies in the metaverse, or maybe I could buy and sell property now in virtual communities like the metaverse, and those have real value because there's tens of millions of people doing this. So maybe by almost being a virtual real estate hedge fund, there's an opportunity. I'm making this up, but that's the type of thing now where it's still the Wild West and there's value.
Yeah, well, I do think that it, look, is just important to, for one, like you said, build a competitive advantage, and that's, whether you're, a business like myself, looking to, sell services, whether you're, someone, an individual looking to, break into the field, whatever it is,
Oh,
that's important.
here's an idea I just had, which I think could probably work. Um, uh, so are you somewhat familiar with, like, Ethereum and Bitcoin and stuff like that?
A little bit.
So there's a way, like right now, there's all these cryptocurrencies built on top of Ethereum that are like exchanges. They're like almost like crypto exchanges, but they're also tokens. They're also like currencies that you could buy. So you could buy a bunch of Ethereum, and these tokens will pay you like a huge dividend, like 5 to 10 to even 15%, if you park your Ethereum in their exchange. And that's a way for you to mine new currencies in those exchanges currencies. I'm getting too complicated, but there might be a way there where you could hedge out your risk of holding the Ethereum, but just mine all these free currencies and have a decent return with almost no risk.
Right.
So that might be a good hedge fund strategy for someone just starting.
Right. No, absolutely. And, it actually reminds me of one podcast episode that I listened to Ben Johnson with Pascal Charbonneau, actually, how, chess was actually something that, I would say was his competitive advantage. People just saw like, ooh, Grandmaster, and, it was actually like a big leg up for him. And it also definitely helped me, in many of my job interviews over the years as well. So,
Totally. By the way, this is the secret sauce of why it's great to be a chess master, and underlining, you don't have to be a grandmaster, you don't have to be an international master. People don't know the difference. I tell people I'm a master, and they say, "Oh, this guy's a grandmaster." They don't know. We know that there's a huge difference. Nobody else knows. So I was in a cab about 2 years ago, and we were just chatting. The guy was from Turkey, and he said he played chess, and I'm like, I figured, oh, he was some amateur player, and he was like, no, he was like the champion of Turkey for 5 years in a row, and he was an international master. He was an IM, and that guy spent 10 extra years being an IM compared to me getting to a 2200 rating, the master rating, and but I was able to use that for, I got into college, I got into graduate school, I got the job at HBO, I raised money for businesses, raised money for hedge funds. Like, people correctly or incorrectly associate a certain degree of discipline and risk management and intelligence with being a good chess player. And again, they don't know that there's such things as a FIDE master or an international. They don't know the difference.
yeah, no, and it's very interesting. Most people don't. People often ask me too, like, how quickly will you become a grandmaster? How far away from you? People have no idea. So actually, my good friend Mike Lallinger in Boston, who's one of my really good friends and mentors, he's one of the best salespersons I know. Out there, one thing that he told me to do actually was like, why is national master not on your resume? This
Oh,
was actually after
I put it on my resume.
And it, like, literally, it was night and day after that. It was actually, he referred me to, the company that he was working at several years ago in Boston. And, it's like, why is that on there? And it did. And like, wow, it was like literally night and day after that. So it was like absolutely amazing.
I mean,
Um,
it almost feels like a weird thing to put on your resume, like, oh, I'm bragging, like, oh, I'm this. But it does make a difference. Like, I showed up for my interview to get into college. You have to have an interview. So I showed up for my interview, and the guy was studying a chess game, and turns out he was like a 1600 rated player, and I was around 2000 at the time. And boom, I helped him analyze the game that he was looking at, and that was the interview. And then when I went to graduate school, I went to graduate school where they developed the original version of Deep Blue, the chess computer that ended up beating Kasparov. And the only master level player they had just gotten his PhD and left. So I
Huh.
got rejected by every other graduate school except for Carnegie Mellon, which accepted me. And my office mate was the guy who was working on Deep Blue. So I played. It was called chip test then, and I played chip test all day long every day.
Wow. And I look, it could just do so much for us, branding wise. But also, I think, probably more than branding, right? I do think that chess definitely has some applications, within finance. So could you talk about how chess has actually helped you, specifically skill wise, in the hedge fund industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the idea of looking at all of your options and understanding all of your risks. So, and this is where I messed up in the beginning. So I don't know how much chess helped me, but maybe when I started taking a more chess-like mindset to investing in finance, it helped me. But the idea is basically everybody everybody thinks they have an opportunity. Oh, so and so called me. He's got this great opportunity, and huge numbers of people. Everybody, half the people in China are going to buy his special refrigerator or whatever. We should invest. And I always ask, why are we getting this opportunity? So, for instance, here's the comparison to chess. If you want to attack someone's king, why are you getting the opportunity to attack on the king's side? You have to have more pieces attacking than they have defending. There has to be a reason why you have an advantage on the king's side. No, but there's no free lunch. Like if you're not just going to get a free attack if if their defensive resources are there, and nobody wakes up in the investing world and says today's the day I'm going to make James Altucher risk. Like, you know, I have to earn it. Again, I have to figure out why am I getting this opportunity? What is my unfair advantage in this situation? And the same holds true for chess, for investing, for entrepreneurship. So I would say there, and then also you have to ask like, oh, I'm going to invest big in this stock because I think the earnings are going to be great. And then someone should ask, well, why do you think the earnings are going to be great? Why would you know and not anybody else? And then you have to ask, well, what if the earnings aren't great? But don't worry, they're great. Yeah, but what if they aren't? Are you willing to lose that money? And then the third thing is that even if they are great, what's the chances the stock still goes down? Because often it's buy the rumor, sell the news. So, I think chess helps you look at all the options, all the possible Zwischenzugs that could occur on the route to riches in an investment. So I think it helps for that, and I think also there's a certain kind of studying that occurs in chess. Of course, there's playing chess, and you could be a good player, but in order to be a good player, you also have to study the game, and that requires a certain kind of discipline. You have to memorize things, you have to study things, you have to understand things. Like if I just understand, well, here's this complicated semiconductor company, but I think they're going to have good earnings. You have to really understand why. You can't just understand what their numbers are. You have to get into the why. Like why is this semiconductor better than something that Intel or Nvidia might make? Why do people choose this over another one? And I think chess helps you to, at least at a certain level, helps you to understand the why of things. Like, why are you playing this move? Don't just play it because Gary Kasparov played it. Played it because you really understand the move. And look, I'm saying these things as if I know what I'm talking about. I have this problem. I'm saying these things because I have this problem. I could be prone to making just book moves and saying it must be fine. It's a book move. But you have to really understand the why of things.
No, that's something that I've been explaining to a lot of students recently. Actually, about is how you need to, when you're learning openings in particular, right? You don't want to just play one that like fits your needs. You want to play one that actually like fits your style, and you like the resulting position. So, speaking of which, one thing
Also,
about
can I add one more thing about the business
oh yeah,
stuff?
please.
So, I've had the same business partner for most of my business activity for about 20 years, and most of our conversations are not about like, well, do we think this widget will sell in this market? Like, again, the rewards are there. If you're halfway smart, you know what's a good business and what's a bad business. But most of our conversations are about psychology. Like, oh, we need to find out what's going on with this person or this person. How should we talk to them? How should we, what sort of questions we should ask? What could we figure out without asking questions? And I think chess, people underestimate the psychology of what's happening. Like, oftentimes you have to understand your own psychology first off. Like, oh, am I a little tired today? Am I a little distracted today? Maybe I shouldn't play something overly. I don't know. You might decide how you play based on that. But also, you get a feel from the opponent, like what kind of player are they? What sort of moves are they going to make? And this is a subtle part of chess. I don't think it's a big part that people think about. But there's a reason we like playing humans more than we like playing computers. It's because there's no psychology with computers. They're going to make good moves. Even if they're a weak computer, they're not going to blunder. Whereas humans could blunder. And, as Mikhail Tal said, you need to bring your opponent into this, dark forest where it's hard to get out. And, you make things messy and bad things can happen to your opponent. And I think Kasparov said, if you can make 10 threats in a row, you're going to win because the other side will blunder. But that's not true for computers. That's true for humans because of psychology.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I actually hosted a big event at the Yale Club in New York last night. We had 30 people there, 18 in a simul. I lost 3 games and in the simul,
That's
and I,
really great.
yeah, it was great, and it was an awesome event. Just back to in person, which was amazing. But I will say, if there's definitely one common theme in the 3 games that I lost, they all went for complications. You know, um, and honestly, in each of, not to make excuses, in each of the 3 games, I definitely had winning positions. One was actually a fried liver, the first time like I ever played that, like an actual game in
Wow.
a very long time,
It
so.
feels like it feels like in a simul, it's more true than ever. Like the way to win the game is to stay in the game, because if you get into a fried liver and they know the opening, they could be a 1200 rated player and beat you if you don't know the opening.
Yeah, no, definitely, and of course, one bad move, especially when you're walking around and this and that. It was a great event, by the way. I did it with Gary Bryan, who works with us, and Bruce Pandolfini, of course, who is an amazing special guest. He was recently the advisor for Queen's Gambit. He did a awesome Q&A, and Bruce is a dear friend and mentor of mine, and yeah, it was just an absolute amazing event. And
Did you grow up in New York City?
I did. I've actually known Bruce since I was 8 years old.
So
And
I mean, I mean, you're younger than me, but all through the '90s and the O's, I was always playing in Washington Square Park, and I lived for a while with a bunch of chess players in New York City. Do you know Elon Schwartz?
of course.
Yeah, Elon's a good friend of mine. We've been friends since we were tiny. So, I like the New York City chess scene.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been very, very grateful to be part of it. And also, like I would say, even take for granted sometimes the fact that, I've had the opportunity to, learn with people like Bruce. I want to actually share one line Bruce just actually commented, this morning on one of my Facebook posts about the Yale event yesterday. He said, Evan is an outstanding teacher and consummate professional. His love for chess, along with the skill set of fine qualities, have enabled him to draw many devotees to the fold. He's a true spokesperson for a noble game. So, of course, coming from someone like Bruce himself, that, really means a lot. So it's
Yeah,
great to
of
have
course.
people like you and him to, you know, communicate with. He's been on the podcast as well, of course, and you're a great guy. So, I wanted to, ask you. I mean, you, relatively had a pretty late start. You played your tournament, your first tournament, when you were 17. You actually, I think, became master in about a year or two. You also took lessons with another very important icon, I think, in the chess world, John Fedorowicz, who's definitely probably the most entertaining grandmaster I know. We hung out for a while actually at the U.S. Open this past summer.
He was such
But
a great teacher too.
so what? I mean, I have to ask, what was it like learning with the Fed?
It was great because first off, he's very serious. Well, first off, I will say my understanding of so I stopped taking lessons for 25 years, and I stopped playing in tournaments for 25 years, basically from 1997 through now, roughly. And Fedorowicz got me in 6 months from 20, I think I was 2048 to about, I think my high was around 2240 or 2250, something like that. But maybe I was even stronger, because I just stopped playing. But he was very serious about openings in a way that I just can't be now that I'm older. Like, so we would really go over openings, and he was really good at explaining the ideas of the openings, and that's pretty much all we would do is just go over openings. But he was very interesting. He had a very intuitive sense of things. Like, he would say, I would make a move. We'd play games, and I would make a move, and he would say, that doesn't feel right. I'm going to do this. And within 3 moves, he would be destroying me. And, now it's much more important for me to understand chess more because I literally can't memorize the lines anymore. Like, my memory is not as good. And I don't know if I'm hoping I'll be as good as I was back then. Like, it's an effort. Like, and the other thing I've realized lately is that tournament chess is a lot different than online chess. Like, I've been playing online all my life or all my adult life, and tournament chess I've just recently started playing again. I feel like online I'm as good as I ever was, but at tournament chess there's some skill I'm now rusty at that I have to figure out. It's difficult.
Yeah,
Like, Nick was a
well,
great teacher, and now I should mention I take lessons from Jesse Cry, and
oh, very cool.
yeah, he's a grandmaster. He's got a really great positional understanding of the game, and he really approaches openings and end games all with that same positional view, and he's got a particular philosophy about how to play, and I really appreciate his approach.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know him well. I've met him actually, I think, once at a tournament in Massachusetts several years ago. But yeah, I mean, I heard great things about him, and he also, of course, is a guy who became grandmaster very, very late, relatively. In his, I believe, late 30s. So, he's definitely an inspirational guy as well.
Yeah.
Um, so that actually, you actually sort of answered my next question actually accidentally, but one of the things that I heard on Ben Johnson's podcast, and again this is 4 years ago, you basically said you would never play tournament chess again. You wanted that 2200 rating, you never wanted to play tournament chess again. So what made you get back into the swing of things?
Yeah, it's several things. One is, first off, as I mentioned earlier, if you're looking to be a chess master to help some other aspect of your career, then just do it and don't play in tournaments anymore because no one gives a shit if you're an international master or a grandmaster or a master. No one knows the difference among civilians. And but I truly fell in love with the game again, and I really wanted to get better. And the only way I think to get better, and I see this, is to play in really long, slow games and tournament style. Because even when you're playing online, you're distracted by all sorts of things. But when I'm playing in a tournament, you sit there for 5 hours and you don't move. And you're not just playing one game, you're playing the hundreds of variant games that could stem from this one game because you're thinking of all the variations in your head. And so you really learn and then if you analyze those games afterwards with a coach, for instance, if you analyze those games afterwards, you really become a better player. And I would say a big, when I first started playing on Lee Chess or chess.com, I was having a hard time. I was like around 1900. But then playing slower games and analyzing them, I got up to like 2400 on lead chess, and I definitely improved online. I felt like I got good, but the challenge I'm having now is it's a risk because you play in the first tournament in 25 years. There's all these kids. Like when I was playing in tournaments, there was no kids. There were no kids, zero. Now, the last tournament I played in, this 13-year-old 2256 player, very good player by the way, like he's a genius player, uh, totally crushed me, and uh, and you have to learn how to like win again. You have to learn how to be. You have to learn who are these new people who are playing. Like how did they learn? And then you have to learn how to win in that kind of environment where in blitz, if you have an attack and you win a piece, okay, maybe you blunder as you try to win, but probably not, and or hopefully not, and you win. But in tournament play, even if you're winning, they're going to come up with resources that you've never thought about, and I have to get used to that and get used to that style is a different style that I haven't done in 25 years. So I've gone below the 2200, and now I hoping to I'm committed to sticking with it and not being disappointed, which is a big skill also in chess, and getting back and beyond.
Yeah, well, I mean, props to you for getting back into it. A lot of people keep saying that they will and never do. I'm actually, in terms of chess wise, in a very similar boat to you. I'm a national master. Obviously, I take pride in that. Running the company. That said, my rating is 2175 at the moment. Not something I actually like advertise all the time, but yes, it is true that once you're a master, you're a master, right? So.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the other thing I found out too is that once you have the national master title, you're always a master. So so then I started caring less about the rating because if someone says, "Are you a master?" Of course, I'm still a master. That hasn't changed. So, but now I really want to. I really fell back in love with the game, and it really became as an older player. It really became a different game for me. I feel like I understand the nuances more. And again, online I'm fine, but over the board, I feel like I need to learn this skill, and it's a pleasure to learn and relearn a skill, and I I switched from D4 to E4, and so I'm learning it's like a whole new game, just playing a different opening repertoire, and uh, I really enjoy it, and I enjoy getting better at it, and it's something I've been doing since I was a kid, so it's like it's the thing in life I've loved the most, and I think with all the confusion in COVID and all the polarization in the country, it's the one thing I was able to retreat to where there was kind of truth on the board. Like you either win or you lose. You don't there's no arguing it. You have to make the moves to win or you make the moves to lose.
Yeah, and I do think that is definitely important to consider. I know a lot of adult beginners, especially now with COVID, they don't even see the difference of playing online and in person. I actually one adult beginner that I was communicating with at the Yale Club event last night. She said like what suggestions do you have for me? Do you think I could do well in chess? Blah blah blah. And I was like, honestly, you're in a Yale. You're a member of the Yale Club. You're a relatively successful person, right? You definitely have what it takes to do well in tournaments. You just need to get away from the screen and go play one, right? And learn.
Yeah, because you in a tournament, you feel something's at stake. Like in a blitz
Hmm.
game, nothing is necessarily at stake. You win or lose, you go on to the next game. But in a tournament, there's you playing one game a day or two games a day, and you're spending 5 hours, so you're investing a lot of mental energy. You want to win, and you'll get disappointed if you lose. So it really ups your game to play in tournaments. Let me ask you, Evan, like when you're teaching, what
Sure.
what is the most important thing people should study? Is it, some people say opening, some people say endgame, some people say tactics. What do you think you get? What's the 80-20 rule here? What's the 20% you could study to get the 80% of the value?
Sure. So obviously it depends on the player and whatnot, but on the whole, yeah, I mean, for sure, tactics, I think is the most important. And also. very simple thought process, right? A lot of players, learn any openings, middle games, end games, etc. And they spend way too much energy trying to like memorize everything, right? When at the end of the day, I actually teach a very distinct thought process that applies to any position, from the starting position to the end of the game. And basically it goes like this. You figure out exactly why your opponent made his move. You figure out if he had another move, what it would be. And then you think about, what changed about the position. Given that, you come up with candidate moves. Then you do the tree method and figure out which one, will give you the biggest return on investment. If you see a good move, look for a better move. And then lastly, do a blunder check. Make sure that there is nothing, big that you're missing that, for whatever reason, maybe you didn't consider. Right. So I think, things like that, will actually help the most. And I would actually argue if you could do that and follow basic opening principles, that's pretty much like 16, 1800 in chess right there. Pretty much.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, I kind of think if all you do is know basic opening principles and study tactics, you're probably gonna not do so bad.
yeah, no, it's totally true. And I think, look, there are some players that show that. you know, um,
Because like
look,
let's say someone's a 12-year-old grandmaster, as we recently had. Like, it's not like maybe he has put in 10,000 hours, but clearly there's some talent there. Is the talent on the positional side? Is the talent on the tactical side? My guess is it's mostly on the tactical side, but I don't know.
yeah, and look, I think for sure it's a mix of both. I definitely don't think Misra, who you're probably referring to,
Yeah.
has nearly as amount of time studying chess as most adults. But yeah, he definitely has a lot of natural talent, and is showing that. And most certainly, he's done a lot of puzzles and calculating. And for instance, yeah, that's why. I did lose to, and it's funny, like one of the three games I did lose to yesterday was one of the few kids that were there. One of the members is his kids, right? So,
Kids are machines.
it was machines. And honestly, this was, a little bit of a silly case, where, I basically fell for, like a simple mating attack. But at the same time, it was, I mean, he just totally like bluffed me. I was like, oh, I was like winning. I just like, oh, I'll take this pawn. And then like I missed mating too.
Yeah, and with kids, rating doesn't matter either. Like a 1300 rated kid could play a game as good as a 2300. Like you never know what you're gonna get when you're playing a kid.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely amazing. And I definitely it just shows that you got to be 100% conscious. Active rest is very important, right? You can never just completely sit. So, speaking of which, the last thing I really wanted to ask you about, speaking of kind of thinking on your feet, one of the cooler things that you've gotten into in recent years, is stand-up comedy, where you need to think on your feet, like there's no tomorrow. I actually grew up, on the Upper West Side. I knew stand-up New York. Since I was a kid, I've been, many, many times. My friend Sam Burrill, who you certainly know, has performed there a couple times. I actually met him, by the way, through a chess player, Adam Maltese, before Sam actually even really got up there, actually. Sam and I actually happen to live in the same building now, too.
Yeah, Sam, he had a special about. I want everything's like 2 or 3 years ago now, but he kind of tried it out at Stand Up New York, and Amy Schumer introduced him that day. So
I think I might have been to that first show. I think I was there, actually.
Oh yeah, so I was there as well.
Yeah, Yeah, and now there's billboards of him in Times Square. He's crushing it. But um,
Comedy is a very
what
difficult
got you into
skill.
comedy? And do you see any parallels between like stand up and chess?
Absolutely. I mean, first off, they're both incredibly difficult to get good at. Like, everybody thinks, oh, if I just study a little bit, I'll be good at chess. Or, oh, I'm a funny guy. I'll just get up there and tell jokes. Everybody always laughs at my jokes. That's not chess and that's not comedy. They're very easy to think you're going to get good, and they're very difficult to get good. Like comedy is maybe the hardest skill I've ever encountered, and it's the other thing is too, you're constantly it's a lot of mental energy to do stand-up comedy because you're standing up there and you're not just kind of repeating some jokes that you memorize. You are constantly analyzing every single person in the room, particularly in a comedy club where you could pretty much see everybody in the room. You know every face in that room and you know what they're thinking. Like you have to read the room really well. Second, you're doing your joke and in real time you have to figure out, okay, how is the room responding? Should I pause a microsecond longer? Should I call out somebody in the audience and do some crowd work? Should I move around the stage a little bit more to keep their attention? Should I do be a little bit more expressive in an act out? If you notice Louis C.K., every one of his jokes, he has this insane premise. He does act out, so he'll do voices of the different characters in his jokes, and he's an absurdist, so he'll have some absurd conclusion, and he also he doesn't mind playing with the crowd a little bit. And there's all these are different skills that you have to get really good at to be a great comedian. So it's very hard. Just like with chess, there's no skill as chess. If someone says, "Can I get good at chess?" the answer actually is no, because there is no skill called chess. You have to get good at tactics. You have to get good at end games. You have to get at openings. You have to get good at middle games. You have to get good. You have to get really good at the psychology. What are you going to do if you lose 10 games in a row? Are you going to quit, or are you going to study those 10 games and figure out? Are you going to view it as an opportunity to finally study some games where there's actual information to help you get better? And they're both very. Comedy is the same thing. What if you bomb? Well, hopefully you took a video of your set so you could watch the video later. Hopefully you could watch the video with a coach and figure out what you did wrong. One thing people in both areas don't do as much as they should is probably analyze their losses. So I played in my first tournament over the board just a few weeks ago, and I did horribly. And at first I was disappointed, like, oh, what a waste of time, like, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't understand why I was doing so good, improving so much online, but like, it was just playing like a different person. I was playing offline. But you have to it's a mindset. You have to say, well, look, you can't really learn from your wins. It's actually not that possible. It's not easy to learn from your wins, but it is really easy if you put in the work. It's easier to learn from your losses. So you almost want to lose when you're starting out because that's like a treasure chest of information on what you could do better. And by the way, it's the same in business. If I sell something to you or if I say, hey, if I make this product, would you buy it? And you say yes, I can't say I have a good business idea. I don't know why you said yes. Maybe you said yes to be nice to me. Maybe you said yes because you want the conversation to end. And maybe, but if you said no, I can actually learn something. Now I can actually get some information because you're only going to say no for a reason. You'll say yes for many reasons. You'll say no for only one reason, which is that you don't like the product. And then I can learn something. It's the same thing with chess losses. I lost for a reason, and now I need to figure it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You really do need to constantly, consider, the idea of, learning from your mistakes. Elliot Neff, a former podcast guest, and also we were actually on a great panel yesterday together about online chess classes. Likes to say, right? You either win, draw, or learn. In chess, right? So, if we learning from our mistakes, in business and on the board, is incredibly important, of
And the
course.
same thing is true for comedy. Like let's say you do a joke twice, and one time it like kills, and the other time it bombs. Like you just nobody's laughing, and you could say to yourself, "Well, I think I did everything the same. I don't understand." But now you have actual something you can learn from. Whereas if both times it succeeded, you won't really understand what you could have done better to improve. Like, because just because you succeeded doesn't mean you can't be better. But it's hard to understand where you could be better if the crowd's just applauding and laughing. So bombing in comedy is the only way to really understand. Well, what did I do wrong? And then you could study second by second the video and see, oh, it looks like I said an or I paused too long, or it's just not funny because now I'm looking at it, I'm not laughing. So it's you only learn from your losses, whether it's investing, chess, comedy, poker, all these things.
Yeah, amazing. And I do think that it is, really just important to consider the idea that there's context too, right? What one joke might have worked for one audience, or maybe one time of evening, or something like that. You know, may make a factor. It also depends if there's an obnoxious heckler in the audience. I once actually was at the other comedy club in the city at Caroline's, and actually Robin Williams, may he rest in peace, was a special guest,
Oh wow!
and this one obnoxious heckler like was just like screaming. He eventually got kicked out of the club, but it's funny. The guy goes, like nice like pinstripe suit, and he goes, yeah, this is one you can't afford, or something like and it just was it was interesting. Like how even like someone like Robin Williams would get like hecklers, and he just kind of like knew exactly how to like brush the guy off and make it like amazing.
That's just it too. Like dealing with hecklers is an entire skill unto itself. Like I one time had a woman in the crowd who was very drunk, and she was heckling, and you have to be very careful because the crowd does not want you to fight back at a woman. So you have to be very careful how you challenge a female heckler, and particularly someone who's drunk too, because you don't want to be, as Dave Chappelle recently put it, you don't want to be seen as punching down. And so you need ways to come back from heckling, and that's a skill. You have to prepare for that. That's a skill unto itself.
So speaking of which, one thing I can't help but mention, speaking of crowd work, as you mentioned on Ben Johnson's podcast and Dave Chappelle, Dave Chappelle did want to do crowd work with me.
Really? What did he do?
I'm sure you know the Comedy Cellar downtown. So I was actually eating at the Olive Tree, which is the restaurant on top. But it's one little strange thing about the Olive Tree actually is to go to the bathroom, they give you the code, and you go past the performer downstairs. And I actually had literally no idea who was performing. I was 18, and sure enough, I walk in. I'm like, oh, this is Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
And
oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say he stopped his whole skit and said, "Damn, what is this little white boy doing down here?"
Yeah, and that was probably a while ago too. So I don't know if he had like, he's always had kind of both types of audiences. But I used to tour with Tony Woods, who Dave Chappelle acknowledged in his Mark Twain Award speech, because Tony Woods was the guy who kind of mentored Dave Chappelle, and is like a really great classic comedian. And it was very their style is very interesting. It's very playful and very conversational with the audience. But Dave Chappelle always has very interesting insights.
Yeah, well, that was definitely very interesting. And then actually 2 minutes later, I walked out the bathroom and goes, "Damn, that was fast." So it was definitely interesting, and definitely a fun fact that I could say. Made fun of by Dave Chappelle.
Yeah. I've not had that honor. I've only seen him once live.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes everything is an accident. Although that said, my rabbi Lady Welton, who's also been on the podcast, is a big fan of saying that there is no such thing as a coincidence. Everything is meant to be. So. It was meant to be to get made fun of by him. So anyway, I really want to thank you so much for taking some time to come on today. I, for one, very much enjoyed this conversation. Talking about an array of subjects from your thoughts on the upcoming World Championship to Magnus Carlsen's position and style to leaving corporate America for entrepreneurship, ways to build competitive advantage and overcome obstacles, talking about risk management and chess and finance, talking about your rapid growth to chess master, tournament play versus online play, and talking about some of the parallels between comedy and chess. Is there anything else you'd like to add while you're on the show today?
Yeah, let me ask you, what are you doing right now to improve at chess? I'm just curious, like what are you studying?
Yeah, that's a good question. And last week, this high school student of mine basically asked the same question, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little embarrassed. I think she was looking for some like brilliant answer at things that I was doing, and I was like, honestly, not very much. So
What
that's
would you say? Like, do you think it's worthwhile studying or watching YouTube videos?
I would say not so much, partially just because I'm on the screen all day. I've been on the screen, well, like probably 75% of the day so far. I can't wait to, get away for a little bit, actually. But for me, the biggest thing that I actually did start doing recently, both with students and on my own, is learning endgames. So I actually roomed at the U.S. Open with Grandmaster Robert Ngaski, a good friend of mine I've known for a long time. And one thing that like really surprised me actually was he got back to the hotel room. I was like, literally half asleep, and he was like, "Evan, I gotta go. I gotta show you this game." I was like, "Okay, fine. I'm not gonna like." I literally I got out of bed, to listen to it, and he was like, "We got into this end game, and I knew I was going to win." And I'm thinking to myself, this guy's around my level, like 2200. It's a relatively equal endgame. If I was playing him, like I might have even offered a draw. I thought that there was like not really like that much life in the position, but he was like, no, Evan, 2200s, they don't know endgames. He was bound to blunder. And sure enough, Robert outplayed him, and it really just like gave me this whole revelation that like, you know what? I don't know my endgames
Yeah,
whatsoever.
like let me ask you like a basic one. Like there's kind of knowing the end games in terms of like, oh, there's still a bunch of pieces. Like there's a bunch of rooks, there's a bunch of pawns, and you have to maneuver. And then there's kind of the technical end games like the Lucina position, stuff like
Right.
that. Do you know those?
Those I do know. I've had
'Cause
some teachers.
I've learned them, but I forget them.
Yeah, but look, more than like so Lucena Philidor, yes, right. I've been teaching that a lot recently to this one adult intermediate virtual group class that we have. So like those I know, but like the ones that are a little bit knee deeper into this Rook and Pawn Endgame books that I have this John M's book, Survival Guide to Rook and Pawn Endgames, which I've been using a lot recently. And yeah, like the slightly more advanced end games in there, like I definitely should know, but I wouldn't say I know them in and out for sure. So that really is where I'm working on myself. Also openings, which is interesting because I do tell students, of course, not to focus too much on openings. And I actually recently, with the fact of chess, recorded a whole opening repertoire video series where you can basically see my whole opening repertoire. When I did that, I was like, okay, my openings are pretty good. I recorded that back in May of this year. But then I realized after that, like, for my level to, if I really want to get to 23, 2400 plus, um, I shouldn't be out of theory on, like, let's say move 10 in certain lines of the open Sicilian. Right? I shouldn't. you know.
You know,
So
the kids are going to memorize all the lines. So, have you debated playing a closed Sicilian?
so it's interesting. Grandmaster Leonid Dawson, my former coach, and I, we're actually writing a book now about not playing second rate openings. And I
I
first
always
started
debate
learning
this.
with him, I played the close Sicilian. So
Yeah, so I always debate this. Like, it does seem like if you know the main lines, you're going to do better. And if you put, but I've never been a mainline guy. But maybe I should consider it a little bit.
yeah,
Like I play the modern defense, for instance.
well, I would say the modern is sort of borderline, right? Like you could find some grandmasters who play the modern, right? So, for instance, a student who's honestly barely lower rated than me, she's like 2100. It was playing the Stonewall, okay, and is still playing the Stonewall. And I told her last week that, look, I know your previous coach might disagree with this. I personally don't think you should play the Stonewall. She's actually starting to play more serious invitational tournaments, and she was like, "But Evan, like you know my Stonewall. That's why you get a good position against it. But a lot of other players might not know me." And I'm like, "Well, guess what? You're going into these invitational tournaments, right? Whether they actually know you personally or not, guess what? They will in your openings, right? In the
Yeah, that's
long term,
interesting.
you're just not going to get that far. Like, yeah, you might get the 2200, you might even get the 2300. I know you're not making IM with the Stonewall, right? So why even like spend so much time doing it now? Yes, there might be a little bit of a downfall before you move forward. But yeah, ultimately, you know, no, you shouldn't do that because the black does know like a little bit about what he's doing. He's going to get a perfectly good game. Also, look, you're one of the more successful business people out there, right? Might have the first mover advantage, right? He's the first person in the industry. He can have an advantage, right? If you're saying, hey, with a little bit of best play, you could easily equalize, well, that's half of your advantage.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I've been thinking a lot about openings lately, but I'm trying not to study them too much because I feel there's more important things. But it's definitely something I've been thinking about.
So yeah, well, thank you so much for everything, because like a really insightful conversation. And yeah, any departing words or ways that maybe people could reach out to you on social media or anything like that?
Sure. I mean, if people just Google me, they can find me all over social media. And I would say there's a lot of benefits, both career wise, to learning chess, and also it's just such a fun and beautiful game. But definitely don't definitely don't study it with a goal. Like, study it because you love it, and that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately you got to have fun, right? If you're not having fun, you're never going to improve. So, I
Particularly
mean,
because it's a game. Games should be fun.
yeah, no, it is a game, and like anything else, if it's you're not enjoying it, you're not gonna improve, and one thing I've actually had several people talk about on my podcast, including some very strong players, is look, their number one tip for chess improvement is do it in the best way that you're going to enjoy it. Whether that is openings for you, okay, study openings. If it is end games for you, study end games. This is something I believe I talked about at length with Grandmaster Lenderman. Right. So ultimately, right, you need to study like what's good for you. And even if it's not necessarily the thing that you actually even need the most, if it's something that is going to help you improve and it's something you enjoy, well, it's good for you. So
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thanks so much, Evan, for having me on the show. This has really been great, and I look forward to meeting in real life at some point.
I was just going to say my sincere pleasure. And now that we're both, recovering masters, getting back into the swing of things, I'm sure I'll